There comes a point where you have to ask yourself, is this really worth it? Or do I really want to keep going? I think nowadays, with how much that's going on in the world, we're all in a rush to become successful. We're being pressured by both external factors and ourselves to do, because our time is rather limited. We can't allow ourselves to stop and rest because that means we're dying, in a sense. There's this never-ending pursuit to grow, but what if it's at the cost of your own life? Bakuman Season 2, Episodes 6 and 7 are rather controversial episodes, and while I didn't really think much of it when I first watched them, I can definitely sympathize with a lot of the angry comments criticizing our main characters. But let me give you guys some context before we move on. Bakuman is a series about two aspiring manga authors, Mashiro and Takagi, who want to have an anime by the time they're 18. By the end of Season 1, they managed to get their first serialization in Shonen Jack. However, the act of balancing school and a weekly serialization proves to be too much. Mashiro suddenly collapses one day and needs surgery to remove a part of his liver. This was hinted at back in episode 4, as he'd lost a noticeable amount of weight, the dark circles under his eyes become more prominent, and his face was much paler compared to the beginning of the episode. This was obviously caused by the lack of sleep, but I feel like there were a number of other factors that contributed to this as well. The change in editor, the need to accomplish something his uncle couldn't, the steady decline in weekly rankings, and the need to compete with the rival, Nizuma Eiji. Simply put, Mashiro was stressed, like really stressed, but he chose to keep pushing himself, for better or for worse. Mashiro doesn't want to go on hiatus just as they were starting to gain traction. That's all well and good, but it was his selfishness that made me and a lot of other people frustrated at his character. He pressures Takagi to bring him the manuscript, telling him things like, the front page color spread is the best chance we got. This is our chance to surpass Eiji. What about repaying Hattori? And the future of Trap starts here. If you want to take it a step further, he's borderline shifting the blame onto him. Why aren't you as serious as I am? You're going to be the reason why we're going to lose the readers if you don't listen to me. You can't draw manga if you're dead. Even if you don't die, it's a bad idea to draw while you're in bad health. But Mashiro would say otherwise.
3ヶ月最後君何を帰って仕事します人間そんな簡単に死ぬわけない
People don't die so easily. This line was the nail in the coffin, I feel. For context, Mashiro's uncle was also a manga artist, who died because he overworked himself. Mashiro was heading down the same path. And it's not as though he's forgotten that fact either. He just didn't want to make his uncle out to be so weak, that he wasn't able to accomplish anything before he died, because that wasn't the Taro Kawaguchi he knew. He's looked up to his uncle ever since he was a kid, and respected the fact that he never missed a deadline. That's why he wanted to honor his death by becoming the author his uncle wasn't able to be, even if it meant worsening his health. He's put immense pressure on himself this time around. I want to reach the top. I want to beat Nizuma. I need to make my dreams come true. One thing to keep in mind is that Takagi was willing to wait until Mashiro got better. He knew that that was the right thing to do, even though he didn't want to go on hiatus either. Mashiro knew this and used it as a form of manipulation. Takagi breaks down. He had hit a wall at that point, and was unable to decide what was the best way to support his friend. He'd hoped Azuki would be able to stop him, seeing as she was the one Mashiro had been working so hard for. Azuki gave him a choice. Did he care more about her or manga? After all, their dream of getting married won't come true if he dies. Bent on his resolve, Mashiro chooses manga and breaks their vow of not seeing each other. This ultimately helped Takagi make up his mind, again for better or for worse.
真城くんなら休まず書ける。私は真城くんを信じる。二人の夢を叶えて。
書くのやめろなんて言えねえ。
So what about the parents, and more importantly, the editorial office? What do they have to say about this? Well, it's pretty obvious that Mashiro's mother is worried about her son. She doesn't want him being treated like a tool and wants him to stop drawing entirely, which is understandable given what happened to his uncle. Although his father has faith that Mashiro would make the right decisions, her mother clearly doesn't want to go through another loss of a family member. Her own son, no less. As for the editorial staff, They feel the same sentiment, with the chief editor taking this situation a lot more personal. He used to be Taro Kawaguchi's editor, and so he did everything in his power to avoid the same thing happening again. He makes the decision to put their manga on hiatus until Mashiro and Takagi graduate from high school. By all accounts, it's a reasonable plan of action, but one that would strike controversy amongst our main cast of characters and even members of the editorial staff. The big question that's running through their minds is, why not lift the hiatus when Mashiro is discharged from the hospital? Why do they have to wait until they graduate? Well, this is for two reasons. The first and most obvious reason is because they're still in high school. It was irresponsible for the company to serialize students in the first place, and will refrain from doing so in the future. Kinda too late for that now that the damage has already been done, but it's whatever. The second reason is because Taro Kawaguchi had died. The truth of the matter is, if Mashiro hadn't been related to him, the chief editor wouldn't be so harsh on the hiatus. Like I said, he took Mashiro's case personally and understands his mother's frustration. He wants to look out for both the author's health and family. No one should have their lives taken away by manga. At the same time, he needs to protect the integrity of Shonen Jack. It would be very bad for the company if one of their authors died while they were still in high school. Mashiro and Takagi felt that this was too strict, claiming that it's their decision to continue. They're not abiding by the will of their parents. In Mashiro's case, it was unfair to bring personal bias into what he believed to be a different situation than his uncle's. The Fukuda group, along with their editors, also felt the same. It was unreasonable to deny them from work just because he's a relative. There's a clear difference with how each side approached this problem. On one hand, there was a lot of selfishness, greed, and manipulation shown by Mashiro. At the same time, there was little to no resistance from his friends to make him understand that he needs rest. In fact, all of them ended up enabling him, further making him believe that what he was doing was right. Their concern for his health almost became an afterthought once they realized he was still able to draw in the hospital, something the chief editor had emphasized in the beginning. On the other hand, Mashiro's mother and the chief editor clearly showed more concern for his well-being, or the quote-unquote more logical choice. When I watched this arc for the first time, I thought it was your standard stick-it-to-the-man type message, and while it can come across as empowering to some viewers, to others it's just reckless behavior and conveys the message that it is okay to not care about your health because you're working towards your dream. You need to strike a balance between the two. Having a dream is fine, but you need something to keep you grounded. The manga industry is notorious for being harsh on its creators. The time and effort it takes to meet deadlines, live up to fan expectations, and to create stories that will hopefully last for more than a few chapters is extraordinary. Overworking yourself is a given in this field, and in fact, the term karoshi, or death by overwork, is something that's common in Japan, and we definitely see signs of this in Mashiro's actions alone. I will admit how dedicated he is not to let this opportunity slip from his hands. There are hundreds of authors who want to make it big, but only a few are able to succeed. Even then, they're biting tooth and nail just to keep themselves afloat, so that they won't get swallowed up by the competition. As much as I dislike the way Mashiro handled things, I can't blame him either. But we're not invincible. While there are some truths to what Mashiro said here, we all have our limits. The earlier we acknowledge them, the sooner we can learn from them.